The greatest masterminds in the world, they live in peace, absolute harmony, got a complete balance, a complete grip of themselves. The most spiritual, the most humble, the most powerful DNA, the most powerful mindset to think outside the mind. It's a universal language. It's an outside influence of reality that changes the circumstances. The light bulb idea, the picture that tells you 1,000 words. Universal is where the mastermind really is. The witness is anyone who's stuck their head through the light at the end of the tunnel. Everyone's in a long dark tunnel with a lot of rabbit holes, a lot of chains wrapped around, stuck in the matrix, stuck in their mind, trapped inside their mind. You know, they call it reborn, they call it mastermind, and you know what? Today, only people going through a death experience understands this correctly. But no one can explain it properly. A mastermind. The witness will teach the resurrection, and he'll be the greatest mastermind of all that would teach all his pupils how to master the mind. To be free from the mind trap, to be free from amnesia, to be free from the reincarnation trap. To wake up and discover who you really are, why you're really here, and what the real true meaning of life is. And that's to understand the resurrection. And you can only understand the resurrection by doing one thing: mastering the mind, thinking outside the mind, and being complete balance with yourself. And you know something? It takes a mastermind 7 years to do that, completely off the grid. Completely off the grid. Or go through a mythological event where you die and come back. Where you die and come back. Those people get off the grid immediately. They can't function around others. They get away from everyone else immediately. My last video, I made a video about who taught these masterminds, the biggest masterminds in the world. Who were their teachers? When you go into this issue, you see the greatest masterminds in the world were taught by someone who was a greater mastermind. Someone who knew their mistakes, learned from their mistakes, learned from their suffering, and then taught their pupils how not to suffer, how to get there much faster and be even more smart than what they were. Be a bigger mastermind with greater tools. You know, we've become so inverted that masterminds are disappearing all over the world and there's no one to teach them. Think about that for a moment. Bruce Lee was one of the last big giant masterminds ever developed on Earth, who can move 7 times faster than anyone can think. And there's a handful left. There's only a tiny handful left that you're not aware of. But when you look at every single mastermind in the world and the education they went through, every one of them, they dedicated their life with someone who taught them how to be who they are. Bill Gates, at the age of 24 in 1980 on World Stage Media, he became the richest man in the world in 48 hours. Okay? He sold computers to the whole government system, hospitals, and every defense force, every department. Became the richest man in the world with those contracts in 48 hours. He was asked by the media, they said, "Bill, how did you think of this? You didn't really do any education. You failed. You never went to university. You failed everything. Bill Gates, how did you think of this? Because you couldn't even read and write and you were illiterate as well." Bill Gates turned around and said, "Whatever I can't think of, I'll hire the person that can." Using the outside influence of reality with the universal language. He mastered his mind, and is the biggest mastermind in the world today. Whether you choose to believe it or not, it doesn't matter. That's not what I'm here to argue about. We know who he is, and we know the influence that he uses on his reality, and which side he works for. We know that. We're not stupid. But reality is this. Who brought him into this world? To master his mind the way he did without any education and couldn't even read or write. Who brought him in this world to use these tools that made him the most powerful man in the world today without one diplomacy, without one declaration of any trade, no medical certificates, no nothing, not one document in the world. And look at where he sits at the UN like he owns his own country. And the 10 officers at Geneva Convention with Garvey at the top. The CEO for worldbank.org and part of the marketing strategy that owns Google, and sits at the UN like he owns his own country and seems to be exempt from anything. He was also done for capitalization, monopolization back in the 80s and early 90s. They couldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. They still haven't been able to, even with vaccinations in India and Africa. He hurt more than 450,000 people in India alone and 700,000 in Africa. They can't even convict him. How come? How come they can't touch him with a 10-foot pole? You want to tell me that? In my opinion, he's one of the biggest masterminds in this world that runs the world. Obviously. No matter how you look at it. Let me tell you something. Okay? I just want to tell you something, right, for information, and I want you to follow the information. In 1989, I was convicted by the biggest think tank, okay, by the head of Water Theft Squad in an international ring. The first person to stamp an Indian and a chassis number in such a way that the acid test and the X-ray machine could not detect it. And that's the latest technology you have today that just came in back then. They knew I'd done this since I was 24 years old. They knew with several cars, more than 80 cars that was done like this. And they had to hand them back because they couldn't prove anything because it evaded the machines. It passed every X-ray test and every acid test. Only one car did I get done for. With all the tools, with all the evidence, right, that they know I did it. But the way I did it, they had to hand over more than 80 cars back. On that day, I was registered RSVP on the RSVP list. Research, succeeds, bring to perfection, because I perfected it, and none of their most modern technology could achieve anything with this, because it was that powerful. So how did I know this? The light bulb idea, the picture that tells you 1,000 words, that makes you a mastermind, universal information, a vortex of information, right? Through a tunnel vision, right? Through remote viewing from another dimension that gives you the influence on your reality that changes all the circumstances. No one can explain that better than me. As a mastermind recorded, right, by the age of 29 years old on the think tank list, as an RSVP, research, succeed, reach perfection, that was my first record. Now, 2 years later, they brought in the toughest prostitution laws in Queensland history. I was convicted 17 times with no case to answer to, and mastermind the loopholes of laws with perfection, again, the second time. With an outside influence, the light bulb idea. I did something no one else did. On the front page of the papers and on current affairs shows. We mastermind the loopholes of laws. Those loopholes not only masterminded everything that they had to sign, but also set the model, right, to make it legal with pre and proper laws at the same time. 1994, we brought in the toughest chemistry laws when they were sending 10-ton amphetamine to Amsterdam in Florida for every month for 14 years. I took care of something right through the underground world on a marketing strategy and reversed their tools on reverse psychology and brought the chemicals back in to refuel the 7 networks. Number 4. So I want you to pay attention. What put me to the scene of the crime was glass that I invented. No scientist or professor had ever invented any glass like this. We took the process to manufacture meth and bring it down, right, the manufacturing process from 40 ounces to 3.5. They tested the glass and they couldn't work out, and it was a fingerprint that put me to the scene of the crimes. Where does this outside influence come? Universal. And I'm not telling you to do what I did. You learn from your mistakes. However, you see, my whole life I've had this universal language, and the universe is our mastermind. And that's a God-given gift when you're attached with it. When you think instinctively and think outside the mindset you live in, God gives you that gift, and it works for everyone. And that's the truth. Only a witness can use these tools and can explain it the best, the resurrection of humanity, to go back in the primal state, to use their natural organic motor skills. Pay attention to my videos, guys.